Hey, this is Jake, and in our SEC 310 discussion for Module 3, the first question asks, in what ways would you vary your teaching and techniques to ensure that you are reaching all of the various learning styles you may have in your classroom? For those of us who were in Mr. Furr's education class last semester, we're very familiar with his illustration about the word toboggan. For students from certain regions, when they hear the word toboggan, they think of something like a beanie or a hat of some sort, something you wear on your head, while students from other regions would think of toboggan as being some sort of a sled or something like that. So these students hear the same word, but they have two different frames of reference for those things. And as the textbook says, the textbook Teaching Strategies, a guide for effective instruction, says on page 164 that as there's no two students that think alike, there's also reason to believe that there's no two students who learn the same way as well. And as teachers, we have to be able to learn how to reach all of these students and try to meet their needs where they are at. For us, that's something that the best way to get better at it is over time. So it's going to require patience and patience on our part, and something we're going to have to work on and continue to better ourselves in. But also on page 167, it says, we urge you to start by planning your objectives, what to teach, and then how to teach it. By varying your weekly calendar of activities, you will accommodate the spectrum of individual learning differences in your classroom. So there's two different things that you're doing while doing what the textbook says. You are focusing on what you are teaching, the material, what you're going to be covering in class, but you're also being intentional in how you're going to present that information with different activities, different things you can do, so that you're meeting all the needs, all the different learning styles of the students. Some different things you can do is provide data of some nature and in some form, uh, show videos and films, get the students engaged in student activities, and also, when appropriate, maybe there's a way that you can incorporate some student research into your lesson plans as well. Now, in the second question for our discussion, I chose to answer the question, how can sequencing help you to bring together isolated pieces of information to form an organized body of knowledge? So in the textbook, starting on page 140, and it runs on to page 141, it says that sequencing has two basic purposes. The first is to isolate either a piece of information, a fact, concept, generalization, or principle, so that students can learn and understand its unique characteristics, or a thinking process to help students master it under varying conditions. The second is to relate the knowledge or process being taught to a larger, organized body of knowledge. So, to sum that up, you're taking a small, isolated fact, concept, generalization, some type of piece of knowledge, and after you present that, you're going to try to work it into a bigger picture. And one example of that being done in a social studies context, social studies classroom, would be to present the Cuban Missile Crisis to the class and explain the significance of that. And then after you've kind of done a case study on that one topic, you eventually fit it into the bigger picture being the Cold War. Uh, John Lewis Gaddis, who is the author of The Cold War, he is also a professor at Yale, and he says that every time he teaches a lecture specifically on the Cuban Missile Crisis, that he has students come up to him and says, "Yikes, we had no idea we came that close." So I think that it would even be a good idea whenever you're going to introduce the Cold War in a social studies classroom to maybe even start out with the Cuban Missile Crisis, because that would spark up a lot of interest as it's relevant to our nation and our country, and it would also expand the imagination of the students as they find out and discover how close we actually came to a war and a bomb being dropped on us. So that's the questions, the answers to part one and part two, and have a great day.